the most financial assets out there that there's ever been relative to the value of stuff to buy. There's too many claims out there. It's like musical chairs, okay? If everybody says, oh, wait a second, let me get my stuff. Let me convert my debt assets. I want to get my stuff. I want to get real stuff. That's a real problem.
The United States national debt is currently over $34 trillion. And while discussion of the issue of soaring debt has become so frequent that it barely phases anyone any longer, Ray Dalio believes the US is nearing the tail end of a supercycle that will ultimately result in the collapse of the current global power structure. Ray, billionaire investor and chief investment officer of the world's largest hedge fund, believes that sooner than later, like all the empires before it, the US will lose its position and another global superpower, possibly China, will take its place. Ray breaks down the reason why he's certain of this eventuality. He discusses 5 major factors, all of which are currently at play, that have historically led to the downfall of empires, coupled with the current assault on the US dollar. Ray believes the US might not survive as the global superpower beyond 2025. Let's listen to his insight.
And those 3 major forces are the creation of a lot of debt and the printing of a lot of money to buy that debt, particularly because the government is running large deficits. So they don't have enough money, so that government has to print that money. So that creation of all of that debt and its financial implications and its economic implications is one force. The second force is the internal conflict. The amount of conflict that's internally, largely due to the largest wealth gaps that we've had since the 30s. And that produces populism of the left and the right, particularly when there are financial difficulties. The third force is the rising power, the challenging the existing power, largely in the form of China and to some extent Russia. So let's call it the great power conflict. So when we look at each one of those, they're important. I also learned in studying history that there were 2 other influences that were very big, and you could see them. The first was acts of nature, such as droughts, floods, and pandemics, the changes over time in the evolution over time of people's learning and the technologies they make. So I'd say there are the really 5 big influences that drive everything, and they are the money and debt economic influence, the internal conflict, the external conflict, the nature influence, and the, let's call it the technology influence. And since they each affect each other, it produces what I call the big cycle.
So far, Ray has explained the 5 factors at play that have historically led to the collapse of empires. Next, he turns his attention to the current assault on the dollar through BRICS and explains that it's a natural consequence of these things coming into play. The BRICS alliance is merely a sign of the cracks starting to form in the United States' claim to global dominance. Let's head back in as he explains further.
Happens over and over, the decline of the British pound as a reserve currency, and before that, the decline of the Dutch guilder as a reserve currency, all happened for the same reasons, which is, 2 things are going on. First of all, they're holding all of this dollars, and the stuff that we talked about is going on. And then also there's the weaponization through sanctions of the dollar. In other words, the United States' greatest weapon to use, as distinct from its military weapon, is sanctions. And so sanctions mean you freeze other assets, you freeze assets. Those assets are the bonds. So that happened with Russia, and there are threats of it with other countries, China, and so on. And there's kind of the thinking, well, if I hold the bonds, can that happen to me? And then why am I transacting in this other third currency rather than transacting directly? So, for example, the United States share of world trade has declined and China's share of world trade has increased to become greater. So if 2 countries are trading, let's say Saudi Arabia is trading with China, Why do they go to the dollars in order to do that? No good reason to go to the dollars. Then they're worried about holding the dollars because they might get sanctioned. And so you see more of those transactions taking place in other currencies. Then the usefulness of the dollar as a storehold of wealth changes. It's like, think about it in the most fundamental way. Everybody wants a medium of exchange and a storehold of wealth. So in other words, if everybody's using the dollar in world trade, then you want to save in dollars because you say, okay, now that's the thing I spend in and I save in the dollars. But over time, as the share of world trade goes down, why aren't they denominating in like China has a larger share of world trade traditionally?
The decline of the US has already begun, and Ray believes it is an inevitability. In this video interview, Ray Dalio has explained why the US is in what many would call a perfect storm. He's explained that the US is plagued on all ends, and events like the pandemic have all but sealed its fate. As national debt continues to grow and confidence in the US dollar diminishes due to devaluation, it seems like an economic collapse might be on the horizon. Ray has explained why debt, which has always been a companion of the US, is suddenly a critical issue. Worse, Ray suggests that the economic crisis might even be preceded by another world war, where, in spite of its military might, the US will fall and, in the aftermath, lose its position as a global superpower. What do you think about Ray's damning insight into the future of the US? To see the latest in crypto news, watch this video here.